I want to thank everyone who's taking part in our fitness challenge. It has been a pleasure to serve you, and I am looking forward to seeing where we all finish. My name's Andy, and my goal for today is to deliver as much value to you as possible. I want to position all of you to win and be successful this new year. To do that, I promise to provide you with some education that you can immediately implement into your health and wellness programs, but more and most importantly, I would love to talk to you about results. And who doesn't want to talk about results, right? Especially with the new year. The title of today's presentation is Taking Our New Year's Resolutions and Turning Them into Results. Whether we are looking to optimize our lives in or out of the gym, our goal is to always become the best versions of ourselves. At Genesis Health Clubs, with our results-based training program, it is our mission to empower our members with the resources to create lasting lifestyle change and results for life. We spend a lot of time engrossed in the physical preparation it takes to be successful, but just as important, if not more so, is the mental preparation that creates the foundation for permanent results. So I love to start a lot of my presentations with a little bit of collaboration. So first, why do we even make New Year's resolutions in the first place? There seems to be something about the new year, the calendar turning over, that gives us hope that we can also have a fresh start. Unfortunately, if past experience is the greatest predictor of future performance, how does a 5% success rate make us feel about ever resolving to do anything new or making any progress? Several of us here probably question, or even think it's stupid, to even make resolutions in the first place or ever bother again moving forward. Today, our goal will be to explore the science of goal setting and seeing results. Maybe even gain enough confidence to make some resolutions we can and will achieve. It is through progress that we as human beings find fulfillment and are able to deliver more value in our own lives and to those we care about. I don't believe anything could be more important. So I'm not going to go back to it, but on my title slide of most presentations I give, I typically leave off that comically long list of degrees and specialist certifications. For this particular talk, I leave them on there intentionally to ironically make this point very clear. The result of the formal education I pursued early in my career leads to the result you see here on the screen. In my more than 30,000 contact hours with members and clients in markets all over the country, I've had to learn the hard way that education without a focus on behavior change, without an intentional focus on behavior change, is an irresponsible strategy to help people get more healthy or fit. Every year, we see a load of people get started, and every year we see a load of people fail. If you go to any gym in the country, I'm sure this is what you find, right? It's almost comically true to see the gyms in January versus, let's say, the middle of the summer. And maybe this has even been you at one point or another, hopefully not multiple times. But this is something that we're trying to avoid by intentionally and carefully mentally preparing ourselves so that at the end of the year we can achieve everything we're looking to physically. So I'm going to boil down all of my experiences as a personal trainer, fitness manager in this fitness industry to two main discoveries. The first is that information has never been more prevalent, yet the world has never been more unfit and unhealthy. You can go out and Google fitness or nutrition programs right now and find millions of results. Unfortunately, with that, in just this last year, Wichita, Kansas, fell from the 28th most unhealthy city in America to the 23rd most unhealthy city in America. So what that means is that we have the most amount of cases of metabolic and chronic disease, most associated deaths with those diseases, prescription medications, chronic pain, depression, etc. So we're putting out a lot more education and we're getting less and less on our return. So obviously more education is not the answer without first solving for behavior change. So I think we could all agree that 100% of people think health and fitness is important. It's something worth mastering and not dabbling in. Fortunately, somewhere along the line, we simply confuse being alive as being healthy and fit. Just because we are not dead doesn't mean that we're leading optimal lives, that we're thriving when it comes to our health and fitness. A recent medical journal harshly made the statement that the average American is dead by the age of 35, simply waiting another 40 to 50 years to make it official. That isn't my hope for any of you. Today, I want to empower all of us to take charge of our health, the first line of our mission statement, to pursue optimal fitness levels, not just a meaningless, acceptable range. And then once we can do that for ourselves, we can hope to spread that inspiration and resourcefulness to others. My second discovery throughout my experience in health clubs is that there's three types of health club members. The first is those that already value fitness as a top three priority, right? We call those the meatheads, the ones that I lift things up and put them down, or the cardio bunnies, right? The ones that have been in the gym for the last 20 years, they're going to be in there for the next 20 years. They're not the ones that we're looking to worry about. They're in the maintenance phase, if you will. The second is the type of gym member that's just brand new and full of fresh motivation. They're in what we call the pre-contemplation or the contemplation phase, where they know that health and fitness is important. They love to be participating in a health and fitness program. They haven't turned that hope and dream into a reality just yet. Fortunately, from the fitness profession side of the table, what we look at those people as becoming is what we call donators, right? And we're doing a lot of challenges in churches. What I always say is that charity's for church, not the gym. Our goal is to engage those members into the third category of health club members, which are the type of members that are embraced into some kind of community, whether that's group exercise programs, personal training, having an advanced training partner that simply knows more than you do. We call those type of members the ones that are in the preparation or action phase. And what we found over our 30 years of business at Genesis Health Clubs is that those that are involved in some kind of program or a coaching program are 400 to 500% more consistent. And I think we can all agree that through the consistency is where we see results. So because we know that human interaction is the prerequisite for behavior change for most people, at Genesis we made that our mission. So our mission at Genesis Health Clubs is to empower our members to take charge of their health. We'll team up with Genesis Health Clubs, listen to your needs, give you that extra motivation, work with you every step of the way. Our certified, highly trained staff is here for you. We develop a lifestyle that will change your life forever, and we know that together we can do it. Results for life is our motto, and we want to look at that both in and outside of the gym. Not just get in shape for vanity's sake, but to serve whatever in life we find value in. There is not a single priority that fitness cannot improve. We know that. So our mission and our purpose is our obsession. How are we going to accomplish this in our community that is currently the 23rd was the old stat, 23rd most unhealthy city in America? How do we deliver on our promise of achieving results? What we have found over the last 30 years is that the only answer is ongoing interaction. Teaming up with our community and lending the motivation, accountability, and education until it becomes internal for each and every person in our community. So I want to engage all of you into an exercise I do with many of my clients, almost anybody I work with. So you start by dividing a blank sheet of paper into 4 corners. Across the top, you're going to start and write what we call your divine purpose. We can't begin to have the goal conversation without first identifying why they are worth making in the first place. What's the point of having goals if none of this means anything? So there has to be a reason why you as an individual exist. And I encourage all of you to write that down. Okay? So first, to put into perspective why we're doing this, right? Why we feel like each person has an individual purpose. Again, we do a lot of these talks in churches. The odds of your existence is 1 in 1 to 2.6 million zeros after it. So just to compare that, the amount of estimated atoms in the entire universe is 1 with only 80 zeros after it, right? So the significance of you versus the universe is infinitely more, right? So think of it like this. It's the probability of 2 million people getting together, each to play a game of dice with a trillion-sided dice. They each roll the dice, and they all come up with the exact same number. So for instance, 550,343,279,001, right? So the odds of you existing are basically 0. I guess you could choose, with all that information, to still not believe in miracles, but the big question, the more important question, is do you believe in you, right? So why was this opportunity of life given to you at those odds compared to anything else, right? So you were created for a reason. Our mission is to determine why, and from there we can come up with goals that fulfill that purpose. Viktor Frankl once said that he who knows the why for his existence will be able to bear almost any how. For you that don't know who Viktor Frankl was, he was a clinical psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps of World War II and made observations on how those were able to position themselves and the mindset that it took to survive the evils that went on throughout the concentration camp. So once we start with that divine purpose across the top, You're going to take 3 of those boxes, and in one you're going to write a personal goal, one you're going to write a physical goal, and one that you're going to write a professional goal. We'll analyze these goals as we go. For the purpose of today, we're really going to flesh out that physical goal. For right now, you're going to leave that 4th box empty. We're going to get to that at the very end. It's extremely important. Why I'm encouraging you guys to do this is that written knowledge becomes explicit knowledge. So what I mean by that is writing something down, making something public, saying something out loud, sharing it with someone else is what makes it real. It doesn't become a thought in your head that you'll forget and won't think about for 6 months or a year. God forbid you have a great thought that would really move you forward that you would never think about again, you would forget. We want to make sure it's written down. We want to make sure that we create clarity around it. A principle, one of my favorite coaching exercises ever is from Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program. So as we think about these goals, we want to design a life that is worth living for a person worth taking care of. Coming back to our divine purpose, if we were created for a reason, right? It's probably a reason, and we're probably a person that's worth taking care of. A quote by one of my best clients I ever worked with was that you either live life by design or you live it by default. We want to make sure that we have a big enough purpose and a big enough goal that will give us greater perspective and clarity on achieving those goals. As we realize how big and infinitely important our purpose is, our goals naturally follow suit. We become capable of not just setting, but achieving massive goals. Ironically enough, as our purpose and goals increase, our goals become that much easier to pursue. So several years ago, or quite a few years ago now, when I first started as a trainer, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, with a heart full of desire to service people, I went about it all wrong. So I couldn't understand for the life of me why someone would not want to improve their lives. It haunts me now to look back and think about how many people I failed by trying to cram information down their throats, and I scared them away with my zealous attempts to force behavior change. I'm embarrassed just thinking about it. Hundreds of people. It took a while for me to stop sorting through all those poor solutions and start over by asking better questions. By instead of asking the question of why some people succeed and others don't, I fell hard into the science of psychology and behavior change. The field is obviously a rabbit hole. I could go on about this for hours. If you ask any of my trainers, I'm sure they'd understand, or you get a greater understanding from them. But what I found helpful for my clients was breaking it down into these 4 stages. So it all comes into what I call the circle of success, or the circus of failure, which we'll talk about. So it starts with first having a goal that's big enough to warrant change, right? Having belief and self-awareness in yourself. Second is potential, believing an alternate reality is possible and worth it. Third is action, making sure that you have effective and efficient action to help you reach your goal. And the last being your result is the self-fulfilling prophecy of those. So as we create a greater belief in our potential and in ourselves, our actions are in turn more thought out and carried out with far greater intention. Right actions obviously lead to right results, which in turn increase our belief in our own capacities that much further. Pretty empowering, right? Unfortunately, the opposite is just as true. When we don't believe we can do something, our actions are typically lazy, if not non-existent. We get the result we figured we would at the beginning, and in turn it destroys our credibility with ourselves. The circle of success can just as much be the circle of failure if we are not intentional about how we think about it. A lot of my research and behavior change all led back to this guy, Socrates, who said, "What a shame it is for a man or woman to ever grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which they are capable." That goes well beyond just physical capacity. He identified 3 requirements for behavior change, that being pain, second being pleasure, and the last being logic, the least important of the 3. So pain, should it change now or must it change now? Are present circumstances bad enough that it requires a change in the first place? Okay, so it's all a matter of perspective. If someone has 100 pounds to lose but chooses to stay blind how it's affecting their life, is there enough motivation to change? If someone has high blood pressure but takes medication and just thinks they're fine, is there enough motivation to get to the gym and get fit? How motivated is an Olympic sprinter, on the other hand, to shave just 100th of a millisecond off their time? It's all going to be perspective. The pain of staying the same must outweigh the pain of change. right? Something that we always refer to in the gym is the why that makes you cry. You need to have a why that compels you through the tough workouts, sticking to nutritional protocols and all that comes ahead. Going back to the Viktor Frankl quote, he that understands why can bear almost any how. Okay? Something that we need to think about in our present circumstances is how much is it costing us to stay the same? I know we always look at the cost of change, but we need to make sure that we're looking at our own present circumstances as well. Okay? It impacts our personal narrative to a great degree, right? If we identify as the kind of person that can't get up and down off the ground, or there's no way that we're going to be able to lose weight. My whole family's been overweight. All of that comes with it. If we can create enough clarity around our current circumstance, it can drive action and resourcefulness rather than failing to create awareness around it or even thinking about it. Lacking clarity drives excuses and dispowerment. Okay, that's where we really assess our standards. So the second piece is what Socrates calls pleasure, right? Essentially, it's believing that an alternate reality is available and worth it, right? It's something that can be achieved. Okay, and an unfortunate and a poor example of this is battered wife syndrome. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but essentially where a woman knows that their present reality is terrible, but doesn't believe in an alternate reality is any better, so they just stay put. So we have to create or believe in our ability to change our future. It has to be worth it, and it really has to be big. Okay, we need achievement as opposed to just want it. The last is logic, where the action plan just has to account for every potential variable. It just has to make sense, okay? So most humans will make decisions emotionally and just justify it afterwards. The logic is the least important piece, but unfortunately we spend the most amount of time on. Henry Ford has, of course, his favorite quote, or his famous quote, where if you think you can do a thing or you think you can't do a thing, you're right. So again, going back to when I was starting as a personal trainer, I was doing all these sessions and working with all these people, and I was looking at it through the wrong lens, and it was from asking questions that the quality of my ability to change people and help people increased. So it led me to this statement where the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask of it. Essentially, better questions equal better answers. Questions pull decisive answers that will empower decisions, right? Statements push, questions pull. Questions will pull you to a point where you're creating higher standards for yourself, and expectations yield a higher quality of life and greater results. Some critical questions that I had to ask myself, and I have clients ask themselves, is your life a reflection of your circumstances or your choices? Is everything a miracle or is nothing a miracle? That's one of Einstein's fundamental questions. Is life happening to you or for you? Can you learn anything you set your mind to, or are there limits to what you can comprehend? Obviously, you can imagine that the answer to these questions will fundamentally how you act and view the world. Act in and view the world. Any question that you do not answer consciously will be unconsciously answered. So that leads us to another question, is how much of our lives are being determined by an unconscious filter that we haven't intentionally created? So we want to make sure that we ask big questions of life and ask with deadly precision and commitment. So there's a caveat there, right? You have to be careful of what you ask for. We even see this in the Bible, not that's just that caveat, but ask and you will find in Matthew chapter 7 that says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will you give him a stone? Or if he asks for fish, will you give him a snake? If then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? A question that we need to make sure that we ask is not just for health, but for the strength, wisdom, and willingness to thrive and get fit. So here's where we want to come back to our paper with the 4 corners. Under the physical goal, right, we're going to start there. I want you to put the biggest goal that you can come up with. I want you to create a vision of your future that is so compelling you can't prevent yourself from going after it. Okay? As you're going through it, I want you to think of these things, right? So if success was guaranteed, what would that future then look like, as opposed to maybe how you see it right now? right? What would your actions look like if success was guaranteed? If success was inevitable, I would imagine we would put down slightly more aggressive goals than maybe we would otherwise, right? Based off on past experience. Oftentimes we fail to even give our goals a shot because we believe failure was inevitable. Today, I want to challenge you to make sure that your goals, again, at least that physical goal for today, are big ones. Don't just settle for getting healthy enough, right? What would it look like for you and what would it mean for you to really thrive? Okay, and fitness goals shouldn't just be weight loss. Maintaining a permanent optimal weight is only ever a byproduct of optimizing fitness levels. Goals should be more based on how you would feel, how you would function. What would it feel like to be strong? To have endless energy and vitality? To have life feel easy, relatively? How exactly would you look? What would you think about yourself? How would that affect others? How they see you? Affect those around you that you care about. Maybe it was something you thought you were never going to be able to change. One of my favorite sayings is that if you think you can't do something, you must do that thing, right? That's how we stay empowered. So again, I'm going to kind of describe Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program a little bit more. But as you're thinking about this, what would your life look like in 3 to 5 years from now if you designed a life for a person worth taking care of? Okay? And we're going to just talk about that physical goal for right now, but I want you to carry it into personal goals, professional goals later on. So the self-authoring program is a program put out by Dr. Jordan Peterson out of a university in Canada. He had 10,000 college students who were asked to write 2 essays and answer a series of questions. The first essay was a story of their future 3 to 5 years down the road if they got their life together and lived up to their potential. They took care of themselves as if they were someone worth taking care of, just like a close friend or loved one. Their second essay was also a story of 3 to 5 years down the road, but instead of living a life by design, in this story, each individual would fall victim to all of their circumstances, conditions, and excuses that move them away from their potential. So with having 2 very clear different visions of the future, one of heaven and one of hell, these students had something to both run towards and run from. Especially amongst the lowest performers, those with the lowest GPAs, dropout rates, etc., they saw GPAs double and dropout rates were almost eliminated. Okay, so think big here. Come back to this. Don't rush through this process. We're going to move on right now, but leave a lot of room there, or even have a different sheet here. That's what I do for each individual goal. So I'll have one whole sheet for my physical goals for the year, one whole sheet for my personal goals, one whole sheet for my professional goals. Okay, so if in the journey towards achieving these big goals, we must understand that our goals and our mental state aren't always aligned. If we are focused on what we perceive as true and false, as opposed to effective or ineffective, we may not be prepared to achieve the results that we're really looking for. In Dr. Carol Dweck's book on mindset, she identifies the difference in a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset and how it will ultimately affect our results. So for instance, with a fixed mindset, you may hear things like, it is what it is, I am what I am, my potential is predetermined, and my effort is only worth investing into the things I am naturally good at. Resources are limited, scarcity exists, self-esteem is wrapped around predetermined fixed traits. So like being smart or just being naturally fit, things like that. So the example that I find most damaging are those that really value being right? Or looking at things as true and false versus effective or ineffective. In Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, they use the example of the tortured genius, the one that no one understands how genius they are, right? Or I also like the example of black truths, where essentially black truths are statements that are factual, but the intention belies it. So they are true, but not necessarily effective. So for instance, I'm big boned. My parents didn't teach me the right things to eat when I was younger. They didn't force me to play sports. I'm too busy. I have bad knees. Everyone in my family has bad cholesterol. If you know that you're a smart, intelligent person and you trust yourself, right, you can very easily get tied to an ineffective outcome. Okay, so the power comes in knowing that you can instantaneously choose which mindset you're going to view the world through. So the far more effective mindset is what we call the growth mindset, where you say things like this: I'm whoever I wish I am willing to become. I'm whoever I wish and am willing to become. You can accomplish anything without limitation as long as you are willing to put in the work necessary to achieve these skills. So, an example of that, and where I feel it's a lot more empowering, is to look through that growth mindset. And Dr. Carol Dweck does a great job of identifying between the two in the book and moving yourselves more into a growth mindset. An example of that would be someone being born a Christian or choosing to be. One's obviously far more significant than the former. So I can only offer you a choice. So for those of you that haven't seen it, my favorite science fiction movie, The Matrix, a man named Neo, for those of you that haven't seen it, a man named Neo is trapped in a simulated reality controlled by machines, right? Nerdy movie, based on Christian principles until it turns Buddhist there at the end. It's kind of weird, but essentially for Neo, before he understands that his perceived reality is not what he thinks it is, a man named Morpheus gives him a choice, and that's represented with the red and the blue pill. So what he says there in the movie is, this is your last chance, speaking to Neo. After this, there is no turning back. You can take the blue pill, and the story will end. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe, right? Essentially, life goes on as it always has been in the simulated reality. Either that, or you can take the red pill, where you stay in Wonderland, essentially where his eyes are open, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. So essentially, he is offering the metaphorical choice between accepting life as it has always been presented to him, where he's felt that it has been happening to him, if you will, or removing the veil from his eyes and seeing the world as it really is, okay, and taking charge. The true power from this just comes in knowing that it's a choice at all. A great question for us is that, are we going to be an active or passive participant in our own life? As a side note, in my years of using this analogy, I had a client put my head on Morpheus's body, and it's currently the background on my phone. So I'm Morpheus, essentially, and I'm offering all of you guys the choice. If you see me in person, I'll gladly show you. Another great example of this lies in our own physiology. And it's what we call a scotoma, right, or the blind spot, where out of the corner of your eye, if you've ever seen something move and then look and there's nothing actually there, it's because you have a blind spot in your eye where your brain literally makes up what it sees there. If you go and Google blind spot tests, you can even see this for yourself, where your brain will make up what it sees. Okay, so if your brain is lying to you about that, imagine what else it could lie to you about, and you have the power to insert yourself into the decision-making process of how you perceive the world. Viktor Frankl quote, I'm going to be using him a lot today. I have two of his quotes right here, is when faced with that level of ownership, when we realize that it is a choice how we perceive the world, people either find empowerment or disempowerment. That all comes down to the mindset and filter through which we view the world. Okay, the second quote, which I have there on the screen, is between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In that response lies our growth and freedom as a human being. So in his observations through the concentration camps, he saw those that did not see it as a choice, how they were to respond, and those were the ones who unfortunately died the fastest. Those that chose to be optimistic were the ones that had the greatest opportunity, the greatest chance of living. So how we go about choosing the lens through which we see the world, two psychological principles that I find the most beneficial for clients are identity statements and bright lines. So identity statements are statements that start with things like, I'm the kind of person that, the world is that, people are blank. Belief systems that kind of channel every thought or thing that you see through and dictate how you feel about them and what you focus on. Which will in turn affect your actions and your results. So one of my favorite sayings on identity is that people may not always follow through on what they want or what they hope for themselves, but they will follow through 100% of the time on who they believe that they are. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So some fundamental identity statements that I ask all of my clients to take on is, number one, I'm capable of anything that I set my mind to without limitation, as long as I'm willing to do what it takes to acquire the necessary skills. So it comes back to, right, not whether or not that you can do something, but are you willing or not? A lot more empowering. So now we want to take charge, right? So a resolution is a future that we have resolved will exist, where it compels commitment. And Vince Lombardi talks about commitment being the thing that drives success in people's lives. I think I have a quote of his a little bit later. James Allen, in his famous book, As a Man Thinketh, said that people are anxious to improve their circumstances, but unwilling to improve and invest in themselves. They therefore remain bound. So the second identity statement that I ask my clients to take on is that I am the kind of person that only does and believes that which moves me towards my goals. How we can go about doing this is through what I call filter questions, conscious filter questions of asking themselves about a behavior, a thought, or an action. Is this effective at moving me towards my goals, right? Because efficiency kills. Filter questions and bright lines will provide clarity. And clarity creates certainty. Certainty will drive action, and action will drive results. Okay? Something that I find extremely important is the statement, do it now, right? The old Nike saying, just do it. Action is far more effective at changing our mental and emotional state, right, as well as creating motivation, than just sitting around and waiting for enough motivation and inspiration necessary to push us to do things that we know that we should. Our identity must be aligned with acting in exclusive accordance with our best interests, rather than just being reliant on external stimulus. You're far more likely to act yourself into feeling inspired and motivated than waiting around for motivation and inspiration. That brings me to what I call the law of diminishing intent. I actually got this from Dr. John Maxwell, who I'm sure it's an old psychological principle. But the longer that you wait to do something that you know you should do now, the greater the odds that you will never actually do it. So we need to fill the gap. We've taken charge for where we're at, mapping out in that box on your physical goal. You have point A, why must it change? Answer that question for your present circumstance. Point B is why must you achieve it? As we change our shoulds into musts, we're going to find more success. What would success mean for our divine purpose and our most meaningful priorities? Or the people that we care about most, the things that we care about most. Then we need to fill the gap. Okay, so between A and B is the gap of the willingness and the resources that it's going to take to get there. So what skills must you acquire to get from A to B? I challenge you to write them down and keep identifying them as you go. For every problem or concern that you come up with that's keeping you from A to B, we need to find a solution for. The thing that separates those that are successful and those that aren't, one of my favorite sayings from Ben Bergeron, a really successful athletic coach, is that athletes choose to have hindsight in the present moment by identifying problems up front. So we need to look for problems just as hard as anything else so that we can find solutions for that. Okay? We want to create a narrative that is compelling and pulls us forward, as opposed to pushing that will always require willpower, that will always fail. Willpower and discipline always fail. There's an infamous article in the strength and conditioning industry by Charles Poliquin, the late Charles Poliquin, called The Myth of Discipline. In the article, he talks about how without fail, we will always pursue what we love most, and that discipline will always fail us. If we love sitting at home and watching Netflix more than going to the gym, that is what we'll do. If we love eating an entire extra large pizza more than having six-pack abs, that's exactly what we'll have. This is why it is so important that we write ourselves a story where we can love taking care of ourselves and pursuing our potential, as opposed to loving the conveniences and comforts that keep us from becoming great. So that leads us to skill acquisition now, okay? The actual stages of mastery now, getting good, okay? More than just the psychological principles and goal setting that we've talked about thus far. The first stage is unconscious incompetence, where you don't know what you don't know. An example that I always use at the gym, I referred to this a lot as the posture police, where one of the first things I start with is getting people to walk with their feet straight. One of my biggest pet peeves, and I get made fun of for it a lot. Funny story, I had one of my clients a week ago, their daughter, or maybe it was a couple weeks back before the holiday, that their daughter said that their mother, who I worked with, still remembers when I did her first session 2 or 3 years ago, where I told her that she walked like a duck and needed to walk with her feet straight. But to this day, it's something that she always thinks about and always remembers. And they were at the grocery store or something, and her mom was consciously keeping her feet straight. So that's stage one, is that you don't know what you don't know until someone else or an event, right, snaps you into being aware of what you're not good at. That's conscious incompetence. From there, you can start identifying skills that you need to work on until you become consciously competent or good at it. And then you do that enough times, you practice it with the intention of getting great enough times, and it becomes something that eventually goes into autopilot, where it's not even something that you have to think about. Your brain, your body, your muscles work together to where it's your new normal, and it's not something that you have to think about. So how do we go through this process? Talked about it a little bit just there in that example. We want to make the unconscious conscious. So where that starts is with human interaction, which is a prerequisite for all behavior change. I talked about that before with Genesis, that being our mission statement. You need the experience and the belief of someone else, hopefully not a traumatic event, to make you aware of something that you're not good at and how to improve. You can also create self-signaling feedback loops. One of my favorite examples, because we use them all the time, is technology. There's probably half of America right now has used MyFitnessPal, where instead of for everything that you take in, it'll tell you how many calories, macronutrients, micronutrients. It'll analyze everything that you put in your mouth and tell you exactly what you're taking in. Where 50 years ago, you had to write it down on a piece of paper, track it all out, etc. It's made it a lot more easy. It's made it a lot easier to be aware of what we're taking in. We have step trackers on our wrists at all times, telling us when we're not standing enough or being active enough. We have even breathing reminders. Mine's going off like crazy right now, telling me that I need to breathe and lower my heart rate. When you're first starting out, I think it's essential to surround yourself with external motivation, whether that's people. You wake up every day and watch a YouTube video telling you to get out of bed and get to the gym, etc. Something that I think is really important to not overlook, especially out of the gate, is what I call CIA, courageous imperfect action, where before you know 100% what you need to do, you act yourself into a better position. So if anybody's ever read Mel Robbins' 5-second rule, she talks about this, where you want to act before your brain can lie to you and tell you not to do something, right? Especially talk you out of doing something that's in your best interests. So in the book, it talks about it taking 5 seconds for your brain to essentially talk you out of something, or the reasoning center start kicking on. So how you can will yourself into action a little bit faster is to just give yourself a countdown from 5. I had a client earlier last week that was getting her hard time wrapping her mind around the amount of weight that she was going to deadlift, and I started counting down. She's like, "Oh no, please don't count down." My mom used to do that to me. Funny thing is that she walked up to that bar and did it, where previously she was taking a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes just to think about it, and it was damaging to her, right? It was ruining her credibility with herself. We're just giving her a quick countdown, acted before the brain could tell her no. And funny enough, she was successful. The body was capable of doing it, where the mind didn't think that it was going to. Gave her a lot more credibility for next time. So a really important principle here is that you get what you focus on. In your brain, you have what you call the reticular activating system. So if you ever notice when you buy a new car or a new outfit, and then all of a sudden you see that everywhere you go, your brain has systems in place to notice the things that are in alignment with your focus and priorities. You have almost an infinite amount of stimuli coming in. I forget the amount. It's like 4 billion every nanosecond or something, and your brain picks out the 40 that are the most important. So again, another example of your brain unconsciously deciding what's important versus what's not, right? Imagine if you can insert yourself into that process over time. Your focus will determine what you see and feel in the world. And from there, your emotional state will determine your actions, and then your actions determine your results. So we often see this, and whenever we start these fitness challenges, is we may not cover nutrition until a couple weeks in, but just because our focus shifts to working out and getting healthier, all of a sudden we see eating habits improve immediately. it's crazy. So if we can intentionally insert ourselves into the process where we determine what we focus on, we're going to change what we feel, and in turn, what our results are going to look like. So once we've become consciously aware, it's a process of then getting good. Okay, and that all starts with commitment. And commitment means that it may require you to invest your time, effort, energy, resources, finances into getting good at something. Okay, anything worth doing is worth going all the way. Um, you want to make sure that you raise your standards and get trained. So, a saying that I have plastered up on one of my walls in the training office is that people will always fall short of their goals, wishes, and expectations for themselves, but they will always fall back to the level of their standards and training. So we need to make sure that we raise our standards and we get trained. You want to make sure that you get mentors and be the librarian. So what I mean by that is I once had a client I would work with every morning at 5 a.m. He was one of the top financial advisors in the world. I probably learned far more from him than he ever learned from me. But one of his mottos was that it was his goal to be the librarian, not a library. So by leveraging others, he could focus on doing what he did best. He didn't want to be a dabbler in a million different things. He wanted to be the best at what he did. He would often say that you do what you do best and you hire the rest. He didn't have the time, knowledge, accountability to program and execute a 6-day-a-week exercise program. He put that all on me. And because of that, he stayed at sub 6-8% body fat year round. Stud. His mind was primed and free to make his next $1 million idea because he didn't even have to think about getting to the gym and exercising every day. He just had to show up. You want to make sure that you get as many different mentors as you can, where you follow that extraordinary leader in your mind that's doing something extraordinary, which means that they were where you are right now at some point in time. And now they're extraordinary because they put it into practice. And then never believing that you're there yet. So through this whole process of getting good, you never want to stop leveraging others to where you can surpass them. And then some. Always being open to learn. Next is accountability, sharing the journey, which I love about fitness challenges because you do it in a group. But finding those around you, making it public. Other people care about you being successful, and you want to share that with them and get the help from them as well. Never stop learning, always focusing on what's right as opposed to who's right, so never believing that you have all the answers, always being open, like I talked about before. Dealing with failure. You are not going to be perfect along this journey. You want to make sure that you own the problem so you can own the solution. So everything that goes on in a growth journey is your fault, no matter what. No circumstances, no conditions. We have the ability to influence that. And again, the reason behind it is because it gives you a competitive advantage. You'll then be able to own the solution if you accept that everything is your fault. Great resource is Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership. He talks about that in great deal. Next principle is that life is practice. So never wish the task was easier, the load was lighter. Wish that you were stronger, wiser, and more willing. Okay, always focus on self. That James Allen quote, make sure that you're willing to put the work in on yourself, not just wish for things to change. Never mistake activity or busyness for achievement. Only execution matters. Okay, always focus on your activities actually moving you forward towards a goal. Reverse engineer the goal, focus on the daily actionable steps over the big picture. So again, we're not just going to write down that big goal. We're going to talk about what do we need to do on a daily basis to make sure that we get there. Knowing that progress is what equals fulfillment. So not just reaching the destination, but in John Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, he talks about the people that don't know what they want, they're just confused. People that know what they want but don't act towards it are frustrated. And people that know what they want and pursue it find fulfillment far before they reach their ultimate destination. Last piece of the life is practice is that you need to know that the journey is going to be hard. Okay, it may be simple. It's never easy. It's going to be hard. How we can go about moving forward towards our goal is by getting good, you're going to make the process easier. So in high school, I drove my grandmother's old Volkswagen Beetle, and it sounded like it was going to fall apart and explode every time I took it out on a highway. It was embarrassing driving that to and from sports practices and things like that. We want to make sure that we're not the Volkswagen Beetle. By focusing on getting better, we want to become a Ferrari. So as we're practicing and going through life and getting good, it gets a whole lot easier. It's one of the most important parts of working out is increasing our capacity for every part of life. Last piece of getting good is making sure that we're being consistent. And I could really harp on this over and over again, but where frequency and quality will always trump intensity. So great analogies like brushing your teeth. You're better off doing it 2 minutes every day than 30 minutes twice a week and getting bloody gums. Not a good look. Not what we're looking to do. So once we get good, it's all about moving into unconscious mastery or autopilot. Okay. Cool thing is by becoming great and really good at something, you cultivate passion for it. So passion is not something you find under a rock. People like doing what they become great at, what they're better at other people at, right? It's something that they really worked hard for and earned. Typically, people don't like doing what they're not good at. Passion will drive resourcefulness. Well, you'll find ways of becoming even better at it, and you'll attract in the universe the things that help you get even better at it. Success will always beget more success once you've figured it out, once you've put in the time and the willingness. Success earns you credibility with yourself that you can accomplish things, and that certainty, right? Any future effort will give you that much greater a result. In your body, in your neurochemistry, you have the process of what we call myelination, where you groove your nervous system patterns, right, towards a result, and you make it easier, more efficient to get to. You're like training your brain for success. And then the last piece, which really, in my mind, helps with the unconscious mastery part, is making sure that you're sharing and inspiring others. My key for limitless inspiration is consistently giving to others, and in turn, I'm giving it back to myself. People will always do for others what they would never do for themselves. If you want to do more for yourself, try taking other people along the journey with you. If you don't think that you'd ever be the person that would go to the gym 5-6 days a week, get a group of people together that will go to the gym with you 5 to 6 days of the week. They'll take turns keeping everybody accountable. You'll always do more for others than you'll ever do for yourself. So throughout this whole process of leveling up, some prereqs, if you will, to optimize yourself. I'm going to talk a little bit about my view on some of these identity statements, some of my statements, the I am the kind of person that, and some of my daily non-negotiables that I think have really helped me level up some of my skills, if you will, and move through this process on my physical, personal, professional goals. And then I've also seen work with a lot of my clients as well. So for instance, some of my statements are, I am the kind of person that exercises daily, prioritizes making sure that I get enough sleep, water, and I give myself the nutrients that I need, that I invest in relationships on a daily basis, because that's what gives me fulfillment. That's part of my divine purpose, if you will. And now having these filters and bright lines manage stress and decision fatigue in my life. So they keep me from getting distracted by things that won't move me towards my mission or keep me from helping others. So for instance, I'm the kind of person that doesn't drink alcohol. And since I'm that kind of person, it is easy to act in accordance with that. You identify yourself long enough as something, and others will also identify you that way as well. So you'll hear things like, don't bother passing Andy a drink, he doesn't drink. Or don't bother asking Andy if he wants a second piece of cake, he takes care of himself. He's the healthy guy. Don't bother worrying where Andy is before work, he's at the gym. Identity statements multiply in their power as others begin to make them about you as well. It becomes significantly easier to act in accordance to. And in my mind, at least for me, it becomes irresponsible not to have these statements because people rely on me to be the best version of myself. And I'm sure there's people here that they have other people that rely on them to be the best version of themselves. Um, since I know that it's a choice, how I view the world, because I'm aware of that choice, I feel like I have responsibility. So as a trainer, right, failing to optimize myself by exercising daily, all those things that I mentioned, those are just a couple of my statements. If I don't optimize myself on a daily basis, I'm failing to serve my family, friends, and team who all rely on me. So I'm stealing from their potential. An example of that, a biblical example, is in Matthew 25. For those that haven't heard the parable of the talents, it's a master who has three servants. Before leaving on a trip, he leaves the first servant with 5 bags of gold, the second servant, 2 bags of gold, and the third servant, 1 bag of gold. When he returns, he addresses each of his servants. The first invested his 5 bags of gold and gained 5 more in return. The master responded, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." The second servant also invested his 2 bags of gold and also gained 2 more in return. The master responded the same as he did to the first. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. Therefore, I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Finally, the third servant had taken his master's money and he had buried it in the ground to keep it safe. The master responded, "You wicked and lazy servant." He took the bag of gold and gave it to the servant with 10, whom it could be trusted, and he cast that servant out into the streets. Okay? With all that's been entrusted and gifted to me, limitless potential, I feel like. And I feel like it's the same for everybody here. My mission is to be that first servant. A famous quote from Steve Prefontaine is to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. In college, one of my minors was in Bible. And in my first course called Physical Activity and the Christian, one of our professors, Dr. Johnson, wrote a poem called Our Bodies, His Gift. The poem reads like this for those that can't see it. So, the giver of life has given to us these bodies to keep as he would. He's made them each different, thus their care must be too, if we're able to do what we should. He's revealed in his word and shown in his world they're important to him in his plan. He sent his own son to this earth clothed in one to achieve the salvation of man. Your body's a part of the you God has made, the you for whom Christ faced the cross. Your body's the temple God's Spirit dwells in as you take the good news to the lost. To care for our bodies in a God-honoring way demands that we desire in our heart. The discipline must guide, moderation must control, and wisdom must imbue each part. The giver of life will not ask when we're through what we weigh or how far we've run, nor will he accept the excuses we use, like too busy, too tired, or no fun. Friend, the giver of life will not ask how we did compared to Jenny or Guy. The question he'll ask of his stewards is this: what did you do with what I gave you and why? Pamela Deal Johnson, one of my professors. She's a sweet 85-year-old lady. Still carry that around in my old textbook. So I know this isn't the most fun thing to think about. We're getting to that fourth box, right? Is we need to make sure that we address all of our concerns and potential roadblocks up front. So what would delay you from being excited about your fitness program and achieving your fitness goals? What would potentially make it okay for you to fail? So that's something that when we first meet with somebody, we make it a priority of solving for X or finding our X factor, the one behavior change that we need to make sure that we establish for us to be successful. 82% of the time, which is the same percentage of people in Wichita that do not even have a gym membership, will struggle with consistency where we lack consistent motivation. That's where it will take 3 to 6 months to create a habit, 6 to 18 months to create a ritual, 18 to 36 months to create a lifestyle. Anybody that's out there selling you a 21-day fix, not going to work. Garbage. The second X factor is efficiency, and that's a very small percentage of the population that struggles with education or knowing how to create a roadmap. For fitness, that's principles like specificity, overload, fatigue management, All those up there on the screen. I know, very sciencey. We'll get into the fundamental principles of that in our seminar on the 5 components of fitness. Efficiency is really why trainers exist, but I'd say 80% of the time we're working on psychology, establishing consistent motivation. 20% of the time we're working on mechanics, establishing efficiency. So here's where we get to that fourth and final box. Okay, so we want to identify all the things that would stop us from being successful. And we have to really be honest, because it could be something that we perceive as good. Those are always the most dangerous, the things that we don't see necessarily as evil or bad, but they're not necessarily moving us towards our goals either, and that can often be the most dangerous. For any of you guys that have ever read C.S. Lewis's the book The Screw Tape Letters, after reading it, I never looked at excuses the same way again, where I'm justifying a behavior or action or time waster, if you will, or I'm rationalizing something. So for you that haven't read it, it's essentially a series of letters written from a senior demon in hell named Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood, who's a junior tempter, if you will. And essentially the uncle is mentoring the nephew on securing the damnation of a British man who's only ever referred to in the book as the patient. And essentially he's not tormenting this individual in a literal sense, but he's slowly eating away at the guy's virtue, where he's making him major in minor things, is how I can best word it. Or justifying small actions that keep him from ever moving towards his potential. Creating invisible beliefs like a fixed mindset or self-deprecation, telling ourselves that we're never able to pursue our ultimate potential. We'll never fulfill that divine purpose. It was intended for somebody else. We're never going to achieve our physical goals, personal goals, professional goals that we'd really want to achieve. What would make us fulfilled? What would make us fulfill God's purpose for us? Getting caught in what John Maxwell calls the assumption gap, where we assume simply by showing up that growth is automatic, and it's not. If there's no commitment or intention, we will stay the same or go backwards. And no growth equals no fulfillment and lost potential, essentially. There's never getting it back. Part of the book, he has the individual focus on activity versus achievement. Just showing up to church, right, is not going to get you saved, is not going to get you to heaven. Just the same as just showing up at the gym isn't going to help you lose weight or get into optimal health and fitness levels. We'll be like, oh, I'm going at the gym 5 days a week, but I'm not actually achieving anything. Again, it all comes back to you get what you focus on. We want to make sure that we direct our focus from these activities. We don't want to get caught up and distracted in what we're going to call the devil's vortex, this fourth box. We want to be only focusing on the things that move us towards our goals, right? Identifying as the kind of person that only does and believes that which moves us towards our goals. Just as important, we need to make sure that we identify that we're not the kind of person that does and believes the things that will move us away from our goals. So going back to that self-authoring example, right? What would life look like 3 to 5 years from now if we got caught in the devil's vortex, right? Now, I think I'm probably safe in assuming that many of us spend probably 80% of the time in the devil's vortex and only 20% of the time on our 3 big goals, right? Our personal, professional, and physical goals, right? And we wonder why our results aren't where we'd like for them to be. And I think that that's probably exactly what the devil would be looking for. Here's an example of one of the letters in the book is, my dear Wormwood, be sure that the patient remains completely fixated on politics. Arguments, political gossip, and obsessing on the faults of people that they have never met serves as an excellent distraction from advancing in personal virtue, character, and the things that the patient can control. Make sure to keep the patient in a constant state of angst, frustration, and general disdain towards the rest of the human race in order to avoid any kind of charity or inner peace from further developing. Ensure that the patient continues to believe that the problem is not out there in the broken system, rather than recognizing there is a problem within himself. Keep up the good work, Uncle Screwtape. So if there's going to be a positive, I know that's a pretty morbid thought to think about that, from a demonic sense for sure, right? But what this letter is saying is that we have the potential to advance in personal virtue. That's up to us, right? As long as we don't get distracted, right? That instead of if we stop looking at the broken system and all the problems being outside of us and recognize that the problems within ourselves, that's something that we can fix, right? So there's a lot of positive, ironic way of looking at it through this letter, but there's a lot of positive that we can take from this. So it takes us to now identifying the daily action items that we have to focus on. So we want to go through our 4 boxes. We want to make a list of daily actionable items that will move us towards our goals, and a not to-do list of behaviors and beliefs that will move you away from your goals. Okay, we want to focus on rituals, habits, routines here. We want to really take ownership of these items and then review them daily. Put them somewhere where you will see them. I'm sure my wife will attest is I have a whiteboard marker in my shower. Well, I'll even write some things down. Or I have several notebooks and journals all over the place where I keep them right in front of me to where it can keep me focused on my goals. I encourage you to have at least 3 measurable criteria in each of your personal, professional, and physical categories under each goals. Okay, and make them something that you can check off and that you will eventually build on over time. So to review my outcomes for today is I want to make sure that we're taking complete ownership of the past, present, and future for all the potential good and all the potential bad. If we own the problem, we own the solution. We're ready to change and we have a big goal, okay? And we know that we're capable. We'll talk about that again in a second. You have a compelling vision for the future and believe in your capacity to get there. We'll commit to a strategy and system to acquire the skills and motivation necessary to move you from A to B. We will identify the critical mentors, coaches, and friends that will team up with you every step of the way. We've committed to developing a mindset that is effective to move you forward and achieve your results, focusing what's on effective and ineffective as opposed to what seems true or false. We want to make the choice to find solutions and opportunities where in the past we may have found problems or excuses. Last is we've resolved to become great at every skill necessary to achieve your outcome, not just dabbling. We want our skill set to become too great to be ignored, where we can achieve every goal that we set for ourselves. So I also want to leave you with some resources, some that I used in today's presentation. First is Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's a classic. It is pretty in-depth for sure, going into some logotherapy and all kinds of psychiatric and psychological principles, but definitely worth reading. Dr. Carol Dweck's book on mindset, the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset that we talked about. Simon Sinek's book on Start With Why and Find Your Why, really identifying your purpose as a means to drive behavior. Tony Robbins, I could have really listed any of his materials up there, but just a few. 3 Steps to a Breakthrough, great presentation and podcast. And 2 books, Awakening the Giant Within and Unleash the Power Within, both phenomenal books. John C. Maxwell's The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, great quick read. He's very quick and great to the point. Pastored many churches over the years. Dr. Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program, again, what I find to be probably the single greatest coaching tool from a mindset and behavioral perspective for my clients that I've ever found. And last, local resources, right? Teaming up with Genesis Health Clubs, with coaching, right? Where could you be if you had someone else responsible for helping you giving you the strategies, the motivation, everything you need to be successful? We have accountability programs. We have weight loss challenges that we put on all the time. We have great group fitness programs. Rather than slugging out on a treadmill, show up and go to a class, and I guarantee your workout will be significantly more effective and way less draining on you mentally and physically. Tennis programs, cardio tennis, some of the most fun I've ever had working out, etc. We have all the resources that you could need to be successful. Our goal is to be your ultimate resource as long as you're willing, as long as you'll show up. And even then, we'll help you show up. We want to make sure that we give you everything that you need to be successful. So in conclusion, I know I've put a lot of quotes into this presentation. My favorite poem that's on my wall of my home, on a little laminated sheet of paper in the inside of my binder and journals, um, everywhere, is Marion Williamson's poem on our deepest fear. And our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Um, to conclude, I have my email address listed below. If there's any questions or you desire more information or would love to set up a consultation or a session with myself or any of my staff team, we'd love to assist you. Please feel free to reach out with anything anything at all that you need. Our goal is to be your ultimate resource. Thank you very much for your time, and we can't wait to see where we all finish at the end of this challenge. Thank you very much.